Hello everyone, Zeno What If here. Those that are new to the channel, subscribe to see some of the content I made. Leave a comment down below for any ideas. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Link down in the description of the fanfiction of this, What If. To bring in part 3 of What If the Gate appeared in G.I. Joe. Chapter 4, Demons of the Alnus Hill. The noise of the chopper filled the air of the Yokota base, as the UH-60 Blackhawk was making its landing. As soon as his wheels touched down the tarmac, the doors opened, and from it came several men in gear. "Welcome to Yokota base, gentlemen," said Centurion, standing before the men. "I hope you had a good flight from USS Tarawa." "That's affirmative, sir," said Scott, standing with his men. "Well, that's good," said Centurion, "because tonight, you won't get any sleep. Tonight, you'll be the first ghosts that will pay a little visit to our friends outside the gate." "So, it's decided, sir?" asked Ferguson. "That's right, Captain," answered Centurion, "we're going in. And you boys will be our tip of the spear. Now get your gear into the barracks, briefing in an hour." "Yes, sir," saluted Scott. An hour later, Scott's men entered a large room. "Whoa, check it out," said Pepper, "it's like the convention of the world's top special forces." "Yeah," said Kozik, "there's Russian Spetsnaz, the Chinese Dragons, the Japanese Tokusentai, even the Delta Force. Looks like the higher-ups took it really seriously." "Hey, Scott," said Skip, coming to Scott, "good to see you, guys." "You as well, Skip," replied Scott, shaking his hand. "So, I guess, you and your team are also going in." "What else did you expected?" smiled Skip. "If Uncle Sam needs the bad guys get their asses kicked, who do you think he's gonna send in, even to the alien world?" "Wasn't that the job for the Navy SEALs or Army Rangers?" asked John Hume. "Negative, that's not their job," answered Skip. "You see, the Navy SEALs are operating by the orders of the Navy, not the Army. If anybody, who should operate here, it'll be MARSOG, the Marines Special Operations Group. As for the Rangers, well, they good, but this kind of operation is too hairy for them. And that's where we come in. Delta Force was been created for such operations." "Yeah, sure," smiled Scott. "Attention," heard it in the room. All talks died down, as Centurion entered with General Keating, Colonel Blackburn and several other officers. "At ease, everyone," said Centurion. "Before we begin, I have to say, that this is the first time we have all the world top Special Forces operatives in this room. You've all been selected for this mission, that will be the first time conducted outside this world. As you know, the enemy known to us as the Sateran Empire has somehow was able to put out the gate right in the middle of Ginza, from where their armies came in. They've killed numerous helpless civilians and tourists, many of which came from your respected countries, and they've also took many of them as hostages and take them beyond the gate. Where? That's for us to find out, but most importantly, is for us to punish this so-called Sateran Empire, and bring whoever planned this attack to justice. These are the orders I've got from the President of the United States, the President of the Russian Socialist Federation and the Chairman of the People Republic of China. However, before making any attack, the recon must come first. We've already sent numerous of our drones outside the gate, but their information brings only small details we need. For the real deal, we need someone's, who goes there and learn more about this world. That's where you come in. You are the finest soldiers our world can offer, and you'll be the first, who pays that world a little visit. Now then, let's get down to business. General Keating, if you please." General Keating stepped forward. "According to the information we've extracted from our prisoners, the world they came from known as Falmart. We don't know much of it, all that we know, is that it's quite a big landmass, quite similar to our, with same conditions. We also know, is that the empire these guys came from has been run by an emperor named Mold Saul Augustus, who runs it from his capital called Sidera. According to our other sources, Mold is quite an arrogant individual, who would not hesitate to throw his own people into the slaughter, as well people of other kingdoms the empire has as its vassals." "Excuse me, sir," said one of the French operatives, "did you say, vassals?" "That's right, sir," answered Keating, "the empire has several kingdoms, who serves as its vassals, just like in the old medieval Europe. In other words, they have to fight the empire wars, so that the main imperial forces are stay intacted. Sounds like a real dirty politics, if you ask me, snorted the German operative, while others slightly chuckled. Now, for the military of the Empire, said Keating, then he turned and activated the screen. On it, shone the image of the Imperial Legionary. These are the basic soldiers of the Empire, said Keating, they all been trained in style of the Roman Empire and have the same equipment, swords, spears, bows, arrows, etc. However, just because they all looked antiqued, do not let their appearance fool you. These are highly motivated individuals, who's practically same tough as our basic scrunts. Put this legionary guy into the modern gear, give him an assault rifle and train him in our modern combat, and you'll have a soldier that's equal to our very own. So do not underestimate these guys. When it comes to fighting, they know how to kill or be killed. I see, said Scott, so we need to do is to treat them the same way as we treat other guys in our home, right? That's right, Scott, answered Centurion, and remember, underestimating your opponent is the first step to defeat. Yes, sir, said Scott. Then came the image of several individuals in quite strange robes. Their image caused many men in the room to murmur something. What you see is one of the Imperial magicians, said Keating. That's right, gentlemen, the enemy has access to magic and all kind of spells, including fire casting, ice shards or whatever they can produce. Fortunately for us, the Empire has a few of these guys, because, according to our sources, in order to become a magician, a person must pass a full school in one of their magical cities, one of them called Rondel. It's basically a prime university of magic users. You mean, like Hogwarts? Asked the British operative. No, Captain, answered Keating, comparing Hogwarts with Rondel is like comparing Harvard University with Silicon Valley. Rondel is a city of magic, while Hogwarts is just a castle and a school. However, Rondel is also known as the neutral city, who does not obey the Empire rules. That's funny, snorted the Russian operative. I thought, those guys should take charge of one of their primary think tanks. Well, apparently Rondel has its own slight independence, answered Centurion. They obey the rules of the Empire, but at the same time, they use their own politics and do not interfere in Empire's own affairs. The only way for the Empire to get themselves one of their magicians to work for them is by using the large sums of money. Sounds like these guys from Rondel do not like get involved in Empire's own dirty business, chuckled 30K. Yes, you might say that, said Keating. Well, that's about all for now. Details will be discussed later, after we gather more information. Which is basically one of your missions there, said Centurion. I should also warn you, that the enemy is aware of our possible counterattack. According to our latest scouting, there's been numerous camps of Empire forces appearing near the other side of the gate. We also know, is that the enemy is building several fortified camps as well several fortresses. The enemy is expecting us, but not you, gentlemen. So your job will be to soften them up, to cast fear of their own gods into their hearts. Let them know, how we fight the war in our world. Yes, sir, answered all men inside the room. Well, that's about it, said Centurion. You're all dismissed until 2100. Get your gear ready, receive the necessary details from your advisors, and good hunting. Everyone has got up and leave the room. 2 weeks after the Battle of Ginza, the area around Ground Zero had been transformed into a massive military post. Many of the buildings that surrounded the structure were now being used as makeshift barracks and offices for the military. A large dome was in the process of being constructed around the gate in an attempt to contain it, while guard towers and pillboxes were set up around the entrance. A pair of Japanese tanks were present as well, their guns focused on the opening and ready to repel any attack that might come through again. While a small memorial had now been created just a few meters away which allowed many to pay their respects to the dead. Suddenly, a large convoy of military trucks of various sizes rolled into the area and stopped just a few meters away from the gate. Some were troop carriers, while others were flat beds that had tarps covering them. Tarps that were removed to reveal well-equipped all-terrain vehicles and dirt bikes that were quickly offloaded. Soon the assembled soldiers, all of whom were dressed in uniforms that were not of the standard issued to others, mounted said vehicles and made their way into the gate. Centurion was standing nearby at the trailer with Keating. Scott walked to him. "How's it going, Scott?" asked Centurion. "We're good to go, sir," answered Scott. "Just give us the go-ahead." "You've got it," said Centurion. "Just remember, once you get there, you're on your own. There's no GPS, no air cover, no fire support. You and the ghosts will have to operate by using only your skills and training. Sounds like just the kind of job we did here, sir, chuckled Scott. Don't worry, we can handle this. Good luck, soldier, said Keating. Thank you, sir, saluted Scott. He walked to one of the LCV with Foster, get in, and they drived inside the gate. Nobody knew just what these special forces would encounter once they made it to the other side, but one thing was certain, the Empire was in for a rude awakening. It all started simply enough. Reports of strange figures darting about the shadows of the forest surrounding Alnus, strange lights in the sky, patrols swearing that they could see more lights going in and out of the gate on Alnus Hill. Ever since the infamous failed march through the gate, the military garrisons stationed around Alnus Provence had been on high alert, and for good reason. Out of the 60,000 troops that marched through on the fateful day, only a few hundred had returned. Many of whom told stories of a terrible fate that met the Imperial army beyond the gate. Mages that carried black staffs like nothing ever seen before, that shot fire and cut through legions like a sharp blade through tall grass. Gray metal birds that made unholy screams as they flew overhead at impossible speeds and eliminated the wyvern riders in a matter of seconds. Metal beasts that were completely impervious to arrows and spears. These were men who were some of the most battle-hardened soldiers the Empire had, men who had taken part in some of the bloodiest campaigns the Empire had ever seen and were now rambling on about things that should not even exist. Things that defied all known logic, yet defeated the Imperial army within hours of its invasion. Slaves had been taken and were now on their way to the numerous slave markets that dotted the Empire, but it had come at an heavy price. A price that the Empire could barely afford, as just under 60,000 fathers, sons and brothers, did not return from what was supposed to be the Empire's crowning achievement. Instead of victory and conquest, the Empire had lost the cream of its army, and although they still had hundreds of thousands to call upon, it would not be so easy to replace veteran soldiers. But soon it was realized that whatever the Empire had awoken from beyond the gate, had followed them back to their world. Patrols would report seeing strange objects in the sky that hovered as if they were watching them. Human figures that darted through the forest and would seemingly melt into the darkness anytime the soldiers tried to follow them. Disturbingly, there were even reports of strange figures on top, even stranger creatures that would be seen going in and out of the gate at night. This went on for weeks, and for the most part, these sightings were just written off as nothing more than ramblings of young conscripts who were letting their imaginations get the better of them. But that began to change. One morning, a patrol which had been sent out from one of the encampments, came across the bodies of an Imperial messenger and his horse. Both man and beast were laying in a pool of their own blood and had strange puncture marks about their bodies. Clearly they had been dead for hours, but just what caused these wounds? Worryingly, the bag which were normally carried by Imperial messengers was missing as well. But this was only the beginning, as 2 days later, a messenger that had been sent out by the local garrison was also found dead with his bag missing as well. That night, a 6-man patrol was sent out to investigate just what or who were responsible for the deaths. The next day, they were all found dead with their throats slit. By this point, panic had begun to set in among the Imperial garrisons. As in the following days, more and more of the comrades would be found dead around the holy hill of Alnus. All of whom bore the same wounds. Legate Alphas de Loro, the overall commander of the Alnus forces, saw this going on and knew he needed to place his men's minds to rest. As a result, the legate ordered the construction of several fortified encampments around Alnus Hill. With the largest and most fortified located the furthest from the hill and would house the majority of the garrison, called Fort Invicta. Also, reinforcements from Italica had arrived, bringing the total number of Imperial forces around Alnus Hill to 150,000. De Loro was confident that with this force in place, whatever was coming from beyond the gate would think twice about attack his men. Especially since no other patrols had gone missing since construction began on the forts. But he could have never foreseen the storm that was to come. "This is Ghost Lead to all teams, report in." A voice spoke into his radio, as he and his team got ready for the night's mission. Cyclone 1, standing by. Blizzard 1, standing by. Typhoon 1, standing by. Monsoon 1, standing by. One by one, the other teams taking part in the night's operation reported in. Copy, move in to begin operation, ordered Scott, as some of Earth's deadliest special forces teams advanced on the Imperial camps. For weeks, the Allied force had sent scouts into the special region to conduct recon, as well as gather as much information about the world the gate lead to. After an initial test by unmanned drones proved that the other side was safe for humans, the United States, India, Indonesia, China, Germany, France, Russia, Japan and Australia deployed their special forces teams in a historic act of international cooperation. As for the first time in history, U.S. Delta Force, Australian SAS, Indonesian Tantaipur, Indian Marcos, German KSK, British SAS, Russian Spetsnaz, the Ghosts, and Japanese SFG would be working together against a common enemy. For weeks they had done their best to gather as much information as they could from the surrounding area. A fairly easy task since the Imperials did not seem to think that someone would actually kill their horse-mounted messengers. Small drones were utilized to scout the surrounding area, but now things were about to escalate. With an invasion set to happen in the near future, the combined Special Forces Team Knot had new objectives. They were to either capture or kill any high-ranking officer they came across, as well as cause as much havoc to the enemy force as they could. They were to destroy the enemy's ability to fight, as well as their will to fight. A task that was going to start from tonight. Selecting a camp, each team moved in for the attack. Tonight's targets were the built-up encampments which had been created by the Imperial soldiers. Said encampments were nothing more than small tent cities which were surrounded by crudely built wooden walls that were reinforced with earthen banks. The smaller camps had only one entrance to them with large wooden doors, while either one or two guard towers watched over each one. To some, these hastily created fortifications would have been rather formidable, and to be fair they would be to any attacking medieval force. Not for individuals who were specialized in non-conventional warfare and infiltration. Near the third camp, a squad of 8 ghosts made their way to the wooden gates. They were surprised to discover that security around this camp was rather lax, as there were only 2 soldiers stood guard near the entrance with a third standing alone in the sole guard tower. The majority of the camp was fast asleep. "Take them out," Scott ordered, as 3 of his men raised their MRB rifles and pulled the triggers. It was a display of both coordination and marksmanship, as all 3 guards were taken out with ease, clearing the way for the ghosts to move in, as they split into 2 teams and moved towards their objectives. Meanwhile, as this was going on, Legate John Cal was getting ready to enjoy the company of one of his personal concubines. A young bunny woman that could not have been more than 16 years of age and that had been gifted to him by Prince Zorzel himself after loyally serving him during his campaign against the warrior bunnies to the north, a campaign that destroyed the clans. It was a gift that he had enjoyed many a night since receiving her. As he looked on at the now frightened girl, the officer could barely contain the wicked grin that formed on his face. He liked his slaves young after all and frightened. It was just more fun that way, but just as it looked as if the bunny was about to endure another horrific night, she noticed a strange black object roll into the tent. Moments later, there were numerous bright flashes with a loud noise that far louder than anything she had heard. She did not know just what was going on, but when she finally regained her senses, the bunny girl was met with a sight she would not soon forget. Her master was now on the ground and laying in a pool of his own blood, while round him were 4 figures dressed in strange gray outfits that covered them from head to toe, as well their helmets. They then began to ransack the tent as if they were looking for something, placing scrolls and other similar items in their bags. But the one feature that really stood out to her were their left blue eye that looked both lifeless yet demonic. Suddenly, one of the men walked up to her, placed out his hand, as if he wanted her to hold it. "It's all right, we're not going to hurt you," the being said in a calm voice. But she could not understand just what the creature was saying. Was it trying to help her? Did it want to help her? If it wanted to kill her, then she would have been already dead. But something inside her to trust these strange creatures, and she took its hand as she stood up. "Ghost Lead, this is Hunter." A voice suddenly spoke through the radio. "Packages are set and are waiting to be delivered." "Copy. Meet us back at the rendezvous point," said Scott, as he and the rest of his group made their way out of the camp with the bunny girl in tow. By this point, the entire camp had been awoken by the noise of the flashbang and were scrambling to figure out just what was going on. With the camp now swarming with hostiles, the ghosts began to open fire with their assault rifles and grenade launchers, as they ran out of the camp. "Hunter, deliver package," Scott ordered. Moments later, a massive explosion rocked the enemy camp as a large fireball rose into the night sky, illuminating the now stunned garrison, who now began to panic. Just minutes later, similar fireballs could be seen coming from the other camps, signaling that the other teams had hit their targets and were now on their way back to the gate. For the now freed slave, she still was not sure if this was really happening or not. What looked like another night as being a plaything for an imperial officer, suddenly became a dash to freedom with unknown beings that had destroyed an imperial encampment. She did not know just where these beings were taking her, but she knew that it could not be any worse than the life she just escaped from. She did not know how long they had been running, but eventually they came upon a clearing that had some rather strange contraptions in it. Suddenly the creature that had taken her before turned around and motioned for her to run off. It was saying something in a language she had never heard before, but it did not take long for her to realize just what was happening. They were letting her go, she was free and could go wherever she pleased. But she didn't want to leave and only hugged her rescuer. "Sounds like she's not want to leave, boss," said one of the ghosts. "Well, we just can't leave her behind," said Scott. "Remember what we saw that bastard doing to her last night?" The ghosts just silently looked at their commander in approval. They had all seen similar scenes take place in other war zones around the world, sometimes being forced to do nothing to save the victims due to the nature of their missions. But at least in this world and this operation, they were able to save at least one soul. With the knight's deed done and numerous scrolls now in hand, the ghosts mounted their ATVs with Bunny Girl and made their way back to the gate. "Command, this is Griffin, we're coming back with the information, and a rescued slave girl." "I see. Well, take her back here, we might can gather more information from her." "Understood, we're on our way." Griffin out. The docks were abuzz of activity over the last 5 days, as the last containers were lifted on board the waiting naval vessel and secured for the long voyage across the Pacific. Several buses which had been contracted by the Navy to transport personnel to the ship, were now in the process of being escorted off the naval base, as the crew boarded the vessel that would be their home for next 3 to 4 months. Maybe even longer. 2 naval tugs were sitting in the harbor itself, waiting for the green light to help the larger vessel leave its berth. While the ship's captain arrived in a black Lincoln Navigator and boarded his vessel with his suitcases in hand. Within weeks of announcing its intention to join Japan in its campaign through the gate, the United States began to activate many of its auxiliary units to support the upcoming operation. One of these assets was the USNS Mercy TAH-19, a Mercy class hospital ship that had been in service with the U.S. Navy since 1986 and was the lead vessel in the 2-ship class. Normally, the Mercy would be deployed to assist in disaster relief mostly in the Americas. But with the US and its allies facing a still mostly unknown enemy with a still unknown capability, the US did not want to leave anything to chance and was preparing for the worst. Thus, the USNS Mercy would be deployed to Tokyo and act as a floating hospital for any coalition personnel wounded in combat, as well as provide medical services to the local Japanese population, as many of Tokyo's hospitals were still dealing with hundreds of persons who were wounded in the initial attack. These hospitals were already operation at maximum capacity, and it was hoped that the presence of the Mercy would relieve some of the pressure on the local hospitals. But Mercy would not be alone in this endeavor. The Indonesian vessel KRI Dr. Wahidin Soedarohusodo, another hospital ship, had also been deployed by Jakarta to assist in the upcoming operation. Together, these 2 vessels would provide much-needed medical services to the people of Tokyo until such time they were no longer needed. Already, medical personnel from other coalition nations were in Japan and would either go through themselves, or remain in Japan and operate the new makeshift hospitals that had been set up. Nobody knew just what would be waiting for the coalition once they crossed through the gate, and there were fears that casualties could be in the hundreds within the first few days of fighting. Obviously, no one wanted to take chances, and the Mercy would be available just in case the worst were to happen. Despite the late hour, Captain Richard, Ricky, Vinkman was keen on inspecting his vessel one final time before they were to be deployed. For the Carolina native, this would only be his second deployment as master of the vessel, as he had only taken command of the Mercy 1 year ago. While his only deployment was a 3-month tour of Central and South America along the Pacific coast. Before that, he had been the Mercy's XOF a number of years before being given command. But this would be the first time Desert Storm, that the Mercy would be deployed to support an actual military operation. A fact that made Vinkman more than a bit worried, as the naval captain made his way through one of the many wards on board the ship and watched members of his crew secure some of the medical equipment. While he had the utmost confidence in their capability, the Vinkman was still not sure just how well they carry out their duties in wartime conditions. There was just not telling just what kind of life-altering injuries the men and women under his command would encounter. Like everyone else on the planet, Vinkman saw the carnage that had taken place in Ginza. It was one thing to treat a gunshot wound or just carry out routine surgery, but how would a person react when faced with a severed limbs or a smashed skull? Obviously, these were trained professionals that had seen more than their fair share of combat injuries. Some had even worked in field hospitals in places like Sierra Leone, Iraq, Kurdistan and even Somaliland. It could have been his nerves getting the better of him or the lack of sleep, but the seasoned naval officer could help but to wonder just how this latest deployment would go. "Captain on the bridge," one of the crew announced, as Vinkman came on the bridge. He gave a quick salute before his second-in-command informed him that all sections had reported in. Everything had been secured and the medical teams were all settled in, they were effectively ready to leave port. All they needed was for him to give the order. The Mercy would eventually leave San Diego just before 2 a.m., as the large hospital ship was lead away from her berth and guided through the harbor channel. Unlike previous deployments, there were no bands, no fancy speeches or even crowds waving the crew goodbye. The only send-off the former oil tanker got as she made her way out to sea, were the cool ocean breeze that blew across her hull as the naval tugs pulled away. Her voyage to Japan had begun. For the first time since the end of World War II, Japan was now bearing witness to a massive build-up of forage and troops not seen since the country's defeat in 1945. Ever since the United Nations gave their blessing for military action beyond the gate, the forces of the United States, India, Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, Russia, China, France, Germany, Britain, Brazil and Australia began to converge on the island nation for the planned push into the gate. Military transport aircraft would fly into one of the many Japanese and American air bases on a daily basis. As cargo vessels came into port loaded with tanks, APCs, Humvees and other specialized military vehicles from the Allied countries, this was a true international effort. Australian and American C-17s and C-5s had touched down in Vietnam to assist in the deployment of Vietnamese forces. As Hanoi had decided to deploy elements of 1st Corps and 2nd Corps to Japan. Recently the Vietnamese People's Army had received a number of T-90S main battle tanks from Russia and hence were a few in the leadership who were more than eager to try them out in actual combat. In Tokyo Harbor, a couple civilian RORO had been contracted by the Philippine government to transport elements of the 1st Infantry Division and their equipment. As Filipino C-130 aircraft made regular trips between the two countries. Already, Indonesia had deployed the 100th Raider Infantry Battalion and 500th Raider Battalion to reinforce the 714th Infantry Battalion and Kostrad that were already in Japan at the time of the battle. Russia, on her side, has sended the elements of Tamanskaya Motorrifle Division, while Belarus has sended her best 120th Motorrifle Brigade. Germany deployed the 11th Panzer Division and 12th Fusilier Division into Japan, while France sended her 18th Cavalry Division. For Britain, she deployed her famous Desert Rats Brigade to Japan, as well 12th SAS Regiment and 10th Royal Marine Regiment. For the units that were already in Japan for Tiger Shield, their days had been filled with drills and exercises. By now, military intelligence had managed to translate the language which had been spoken by the attacking army. From this, they finally had a name for their new enemy, the Sateran Empire, and after some questionable methods, military intelligence discovered just why this empire had attacked Tokyo: conquest and subjugation. Obviously, this information did not sit well with any of the governments which were invested in the upcoming counterattack. Not to mention that the well-being of slaves that had been taken came into question. All the more reason to go through the gate and make this Sateran Empire pay for its aggression. At Camp Fuji itself, 3rd Tracks and the Marines stationed at the base were joined by elements of both the 5th and 11th Marine Regiments. Along with the Indian Army's 11th Gorkha Rifles, the recently arrived Madras Regiment joined with the 12th Armored Regiment in training with their Japanese counterparts. For the Japanese, it was a case of extreme culture shock, as they soon found themselves working alongside 2 battle-hardened military units who had seen more than their fair share of combat over the decades. Even more so, they were both shocked of just how aggressive these Marines and soldiers were in simulated combat. Yet, Japan was going to be leading this multinational force through the gate when the time came and would be a part of the first wave of the invasion. Which meant they were gonna have to learn everything they could from their seasoned allies. But despite the hectic schedule and exercises, the men and women at Camp Fuji were able to get some downtime. Downtime they used to either relax or just contact their loved ones back home. "Hi Dad," Williams said happily, as he used his iPhone to video chat with his father back in Cedar Hill. The Lance Corporal was now back in his barracks and dressed in a white t-shirt and camo pants with a number of other Marines who were engaged in their own things. "How was your day, kid?" the older African American replied, as he sat in his office at the firehouse, still doing drills. "Like you would not believe," the young man replied. "We are going through soon." "How is the firehouse?" "Crazy," sighed the fire chief. "Since everyone in town saw you and Puller on the news, they've been dropping by every day to see if you had called home yet. You guys now have an fan club. Just today, the mayor came here with a news crew to boast of how proud the town was of their boys in Japan. I still can't believe you will be going to another world." "Me neither," replied the Marine. "I thought my last tour would be uneventful, now I find out that I'm going to another world." "Wait, damn. What?" the fire chief asked his son curiously. "I'm gonna miss the lights and siren parade this year," the Marine said with a slight pout, which caused his father to laugh a bit. "Don't worry son, I promise I will send you the video when I can. Hey, I gotta go. I gotta pick up your mother and sisters from the restaurant. Hug them for me," the Marine replied. "I will call back, hopefully tomorrow." Williams Sr. just nodded before the video link ended, leaving the young Marine to himself with his thoughts. Still having time to kill, Lewis decided to make his way to the gym located on the base to blow off some steam. It took a little while, but he soon came upon the building that was now being shared by both the Americans and Japanese, and made his way inside. At first it looked as if he would have the area to himself, which he did not really mind. That was until he heard some grunting coming from one of the rooms. Upon investigation, the Lance Corporal soon came upon a sight he was not inspecting. For there was a very familiar individual that was more or less shadow sparring alone on one of the training mats. Shino Kuribayashi aka Sergeant Cutie McSlaughter. The young woman was wearing a pair of combat pants and a dark vest that looked as if it could barely contain her assets. She has a serious look on her face as she more or less went to town on a dummy that was used for close quarters combat training, and from what the Marine saw, he was glad that he was not said dummy. The Marine was quite content to just leave the curvy sergeant alone, but he was not paying enough attention to his surroundings, mainly because the sergeant's attire distracted him and tripped over himself, startling the young woman and causing her to lead into a fighting stance on reflex. But her aggressive nature soon vanished when she saw a person she really hoped she would not run into again. Especially after that little incident a few weeks ago. Oh, I'm sorry," said Shino quickly. "The gym on our side of the base was being used by the Indonesians and I thought no one would be in here this hour." It's okay, replied Lewis, as he quickly got up from the floor. "Didn't know you were in here. I'll just leave you alone." "Nah, it's okay," Shino replied calmly, surprising the Marine. "I was kinda hoping to have someone to spar with." A cold chill suddenly went up the Marine's spine, as he could clearly remember what happened to the last soldier that chose to be her sparring partner. The Indonesian Marine had yet to be discharged from the base hospital. I was just gonna lift some weights," Williams replied rather nervously. "Oh," replied the sergeant, sounding a bit disappointed. "Well, do you need someone to spot for you?" Okay," Williams answered back, rather surprised that the buxom sergeant wanted to help. But he and Shino made their way towards the weightlifting section to begin. Hopefully, the curvy sergeant would not be able to talk him into sparring with her as the hours went along. As well as hoping she did not catch him checking her out. When I get leave, William Taylor idly thought, the first thing I am going to do is go get authentic Brooklyn-style pizza. No. First a breakfast of pancakes with a huge slab of ham or bacon, lots of bacon and hash browns. Screw the consequences. Not that the Saturans, Lady Octavia said their capital city was called Sidera, although she didn't refer to the empire as anything other than, the empire, didn't set a good table to those they considered, friend. Once their livestock and other foodstuffs had passed inspection and arrangements had been made so they could cook without accidentally burning anything down, they seemed much more at ease than with the stuff that was being catered in. But then again, who would want to face the rest of their life on a diet of MREs, known commonly as meals rejected by everyone? Last night's chicken had been especially nice, with a flavor that was definitely not just like chicken, or at least not like the mass-produced birds that dominated the American market. Still, there's nothing like the taste of home. A taste of home. I may not be home, but at least I know I'll get back there someday. Sharing a meal was a good way to get to know someone, and if he really wanted these people to trust him, he had to be among them, breaking bread, taking quarters on premise and making his door available whenever needed. Of course, the Saturans didn't do breakfast per se, only the noon meal and the evening meal with small meals throughout the day. So after a shower, shave, and donning his uniform, Taylor headed for Senior Chief Richardson's office to check the overnight duty log and grab an apple Danish before going to see Lady Octavia. "Ah, good morning, Lieutenant," Octavia greeted pleasantly as her majordomo escorted Lieutenant Taylor into the space she was using as her sitting room. Her daughter sat by the window, reading to her brothers. Taylor was starting to acclimate to the oddities of Johnnian English. The oddest part was that there was Johnnian English. Latin, Greek, some sort of mutation of one or both. That was not a complete surprise considering an army looking and behaving like ancient Romans, but a recognizable form of English. It had been so completely unexpected. The two branches of the language seemed to have diverged sometime in the past 600 years, but still drifting in the same general direction. It was one of many little curiosities that his superiors wanted him to find an explanation for. Fortunately, it seemed simpler to go from American English to Johnnian than the reverse, but Octavia and her daughter had both demonstrated that they had no fear of a language that routinely dragged other tongues into dark alleys and mugged them for vocabulary, as they both eagerly devoured any books he brought them. Interestingly, while Shakespeare was completely new to them, Chaucer was not only familiar to them, but Octavia's daughter, Lucilla, actually brought out a family copy of his works to compare it with one Taylor had provided. "Good morning, ma'am, I trust you slept well." "Quite comfortably, all things considered, Lieutenant," Octavia answered, rising to greet him and burying behind the calm facade of her visage the dread and nightmares that had been weighing on her ever since the surrender, and gestured to a chair across from her. "Please sit. Before we discuss today's business, there is something I must ask you." Taylor took the indicated seat across from Octavia, who then properly reseated herself. "Lieutenant, what will become of my children?" Octavia asked quietly. Taylor looked at her confused. "What do you mean?" Octavia sighed. "I have been a soldier's wife for many years, and I have seen many a campaign. Perhaps the Empire. Perhaps we have earned this humbling. But I will do anything to save my children from a life in chains. Lucilla is of age to marry." Taken aback, Taylor raised a hand in protest. "Please. Ma'am, I want you to listen to me. I swear to you that no one is going to put your children into slavery. We don't do things like that. All that will happen is your family will stay here until such time as our governments reach an agreement, and then you'll go home. I swear on my honor." He faced her squarely. "Besides, in my country, your daughter is legally still too young to marry. And a good thing, because if she is as formidable as her mother, then the world will need at least another couple of years to be ready for her," he added with a wry smile. Octavia blinked. This world was, indeed, strange. She might not be willing to wait that long. At least not for just any man. She might consider waiting for a certain man. She teased, feeling a flood of relief upon her. He glanced nervously over at Lucilla, who merely turned a glance of her own and nodded politely with a smile and returned to the story she was reading to her brothers. "At any rate, I have some news on the lists you gave me." "Yes." Octavia felt herself tense. As I said, identifying the dead will take time and in some cases if at all may take more exotic means that we have at our disposal. Bodies mutilated by machine gun fire and high explosives were usually hard to identify. DNA testing would be necessary in many cases, provided of course that the soldier in question had any blood kin that could be tested. That aside, I can tell you that your husband is alive. I don't have the details but he was wounded while leading an attack on our embassy. He's alive and recovering aboard the hospital ship Mercy. May my children and I go see him. I will see what I can do. He is still a prisoner of war, Taylor reminded. Of course, I could not ask more of you, Lieutenant. Still, this is wonderful news for myself and my family. I'm glad I could deliver it. Only Invicta was left out of the 7 or so forts that had been established, as the other had all been destroyed over the last few days. What started out as a formidable garrison of 150,000 legionnaires has now down to 85,000, as many had either been killed, deserted or simply disappeared in the night. All of the senior officers that had been in command of the smaller forts had either been found dead or were missing. As their encampments and supplies, enough to last for months, were completely and utterly destroyed with most of their men dead or seriously wounded. The survivors were almost hysterical when they were found, as the spoke of creatures that were completely gray with no faces. But the one feature that had really had the soldiers in a panic, were the demonic blue left eye these beings had, which never blinked and seemed to glow in the darkness. Many soldiers tried to go after these beings after their camps were attacked, but none returned, as their dead bodies were found the following mornings. Some had their throats sliced open, while many others had what looked like puncture wounds no one had ever seen before. And because of that, many of these men named these creatures as the demons of the Alnus Hill. With his men now in a state of panic and near revolt, Loro ordered the survivors to take refuge in Invicta, the largest of the forts and his main camp. From there, he ordered his men to scavenge whatever materials they could from the destroyed camps and use them to reinforce his own. The legate was not about to let some faceless enemy chase the imperial army away, especially since they had the task of defending the empire from whatever came through the gate. Even more so, one of the few royal messengers that managed to make it to his garrison carried knew that a massive supply caravan was now on its way from Sidera. Along with over 80,000 badly needed reinforcements, troops who had taken part in the campaign against the warrior bunny tribes in the north. Tribes that no longer exist thanks to them. This was news that finally lifted the spirits of the men already at Alnus Hill. But their jubilation was quickly cut short, when they saw something shoot of the forest at strike the dragon messenger as he tried to fly back to the capital, a victim of a Stinger surface-to-air missile launched by a Delta Force team that was tracking its movements. It was a sobering reminder that they were still in danger. All hopes now rested on the relief force coming from Sidera, as supplies were now dangerously slow. Starvation was slowly creeping in, as daily rations were cut so as to ensure every man had a meal. If things did not improve soon, the Laura would have a full-on revolt on his hands, and it was rare for a legate to survive such a crisis. "They're here! They're here!" an imperial soldier suddenly called out from his tower, as he could clearly see the flags of numerous legions come into view. It was truly a magnificent sight, as over 80,000 veteran legionnaires with auxiliaries marched down the unpaved road, followed by dozens of horse-drawn carriages loaded down with food, water, weapons and everything else one could imagine one would need in a situation like this. "They're finally here," another soldier yelled out, as he and the rest of Fort Invicta's surviving garrison rushed to meet their fellow comrades in arms. Even Laura allowed himself to smile for the first time in weeks, as a long-dormant sense of confidence began to awaken him. With his men resupplied and with fresh troops, the legate was positive that he would be able to find just who or what had been attacking his troops for so long. But unknown to him, several other individuals were watching the approaching reinforcements. Targets within range. All units, stand by. Ready to fire. Explosives are primed. All set. Then it happened. The road on which the new force marched upon suddenly erupted in smoke and flame, consuming all those who stood upon it. Moments later, the rear of the column fell victim to a similar fate, as men and beast alike vanished in a hellish fireball that could not even be put into words. Men screamed and horses began to panic, as they tried to escape the inferno, running in any which way direction they could in an attempt to find safety. But they were soon cut to shreds by heavy automatic gunfire coming from the tree line. All the soldiers in Invicta could do at this point was look on helplessly as what was supposed to be their salvation, literally went up in smoke. Everything was being destroyed before their eyes and there was nothing they could do to stop it. How do you fight an enemy that you could not see? An enemy that has bested you for a week and reduced your forces to just a single fort. Men began to panic and weep openly, as others fell to the ground begged Flair to show them mercy. The gods have abandoned us. We're all gonna die here. The demons of ALNUS will kill us all. Lord Flair save us. Show us mercy from your fury. Laura's men were now in full panic and were on the verge of full-on revolt. For weeks they had been targeted by an unseen enemy that had taken so many of their comrades and they had reached their breaking point. Men were now tearing off their uniforms and running as fast as they could into the countryside. Some continued to beg for mercy from Flair. Others just went into complete madness, as they fell to the ground laughing and muttering how the demons were going to kill them. He had now effectively lost control of Invicta and these was nothing he could do to stop it. Whatever the Empire had awoken across the gate had indeed followed them back into Falmart and now, the Empire was paying a heavy price for its hubris. It was his last thought, as a group of his former soldiers grabbed him from behind and savagely began to beat their former commander to death. Seeing all the panic in the fort, Scott smiled. Mission accomplished, he said, let's move. Chapter 5. D-Day, Operation Stargate begins. We'll need to strike with unparalleled speed and aggression, said Hazama. We have tracked the Johnnian day-night cycle. About 2 hours before dawn will be our optimum time to attack. All our tanks will be carrying a 90% loadout of M908 obstacle defeating and canister rounds for the initial assault. We do not expect many targets requiring armor-piercing rounds. According to the intelligence report, said Centurion, the enemy forces has been fallen into disarray, thanks to the efforts of Colonel Scott Mitchell and other Special Forces teams. Right now, the only one remaining is a token of Legion led by Legate Titian, with the strength of 80,000 men, as well 5,000 auxiliary beastmen, 800 ballistas and 200 wyverns. If we hit them now, we'll be able to secure the main hill the gate is located and fortify it. We must quickly disrupt the enemy first line of defenses and scatter them, continued Hazama. With this we will open a perimeter with tanks and light assault vehicles large enough to start deploying our field guns. Please note that the use of phosphorus munitions has been forbidden at this time. General, said Centurion, according to our report, the enemy forces does not have the defenses close to the gate. They've occupied the hill next to it and have the plain stand as neutral. My guess is that they expect us to come out from the gate and then go straight down to the plain, where they can jump on us. I see, said Hazama, so, they're planning an ambush. Considering that they've already lost more than 3/4 of their forces, I'd say, their best options is to destroy the invading forces with a sudden strike, said Centurion. That way, with the main force in disarray, they can strike directly at the gate and push us back to Tokyo. So they can invade Ginza once more, asked Colonel Gibbs. Negative, they don't have enough manpower for that, answered Centurion. What they planning to do is to put this situation into a stalemate. When they control one side of the gate, we control other side, and no one can't do anything to resolve it. I see, said Hazama. So, what's your suggestion, Commander Prime? When we'll begin our invasion into the other side, said Centurion, I suggest we should take with us only a company of tanks with the battalion of infantry, as well 3 batteries of German Ps 2000 and 1 battery of Jeopard Spads. That way, we'll be able to use maximum firepower against the enemy's supposed superior forces. Their numbers would do them no good against our firepower. Secondly, once we pass the gate, we will dig out our defenses. Titian would believe that the barbarians, that's us, are weaker, so he'll attack us with full force he's got. And that's where he'll breaks his neck. Our firepower will be more than enough to destroy his wyverns and ballistas, and our infantry and tanks will make short work of his infantry and beastmen. After that, all we need is to make a strong push to take the enemy hill, and Viola, we got the Alnus. Sounds real tricky, Commander, shook his head General Lyudwig. But also logical, said General Zhukov. I'd say, that's just how General Suvorov used to win his battles, not with numbers but with skills. Precisely, said Centurion, and you should know, that I always trained my men in style of Suvorov, Science of Victory, which just so to be happened my favorite handbook. Snorted Colonel Gibbs, I don't know, how much 18th century generals' tactics should be used in today's modern battlefield. On the contrary, Colonel, waved his finger Centurion, smiling, you shall see, that Suvorov was a genius, who's been able to see far beyond his time. Very well then, said Hazama, we shall see, how right you really are, Centurion-san. I'm taking full responsibility, General, answered Centurion, that's why I shall command the first strike personally. Agreed, said Hazama, just don't get yourself killed. After all, you are our commander. Don't worry, chuckled Centurion, it'll take more than some Roman wannabes and Tolkien escapists to stop this soldier. The others chuckled, while Hazama looked to a short squat grim-faced American colonel in the back of the room. Colonel Potter, we'll need your 407th Combat Support Hospital ready to set up as quickly as possible. We'll try to give you enough room to work but the enemy might not cooperate. We know that once identified, the enemy treated Street Luke's hospital is neutral ground but don't expect the same consideration here. Understood General, the old veteran answered. He'd seen 4 previous conflicts and fervently hoped this one would be his last. He had a few concerns he needed to discuss with the general but they would have to hold until later. Specifically, a combat support hospital had about 250 beds. This was fewer than previous configurations as it was assumed there would always be sufficient airlift capacity to evacuate recovering patients elsewhere. That would not be the case here, so available bed space would need to be increased accordingly. In the meantime, Hazama continued his briefing. On the issue of prisoners, again, we have no clear picture on how our enemies will react if backed into a hopeless situation, assuming they even recognize it as such. In our experiences during the Battle of Ginza, some enemy acted in a rational manner and surrendered willingly. Others were completely fanatical and attempted to kill soldiers offering them quarter. I will tell all of you and for you to tell your men, that you are to protect themselves and fellow Allied troops first. If there is even a shred of doubt whether an enemy will surrender and comply with instructions, then you must act as if they are still belligerents. Near the front of the room, a lieutenant colonel wearing the patch of the 101st Airborne raised his hand. General, complying with instructions assumes the ability to communicate with the enemy. None of us speak Hobbit. A few light laughs went up, mainly among the Americans. General Hazama smiled. We have identified a number of languages in use. A few speak clearly recognizable Latin. Many of those identified as from their nobility speak a form of English, but the most common language is a strain of the Latin family. It seems somewhere mixed between Latin, Italian, and French. We have linguists compiling phrase books and those should be distributed by the end of the day. In the meantime, said Centurion, I think I shall check out about our prisoners on Iwo Jima. There's been a lot of disturbing rumors lately going on, that some of the prisoners are acting really boastful. Are they planning to start a riot? Asked General Liudwig. No, they actually demanding some special accommodations, answered Centurion. Many of them are nobles, and some are considered to be quite young and brash. I think it's time for me to go there and cool them off. Legate Titian calmly walked his lines as was his habit. It was his own granted reward for toiling with the politics he was forced to confront on a nearly constant basis. The inner ring had been completed to his specifications, sloping embankments of earth dropped off to a nearly sheer 30-foot drop. At the base, a trench had been dug and partially filled with tar and pitch. He had lit torches placed every 10 feet to turn the trench into a veritable phlegethon on command. A ring of archers stood on constant watch. Parapets lined the only direct route to the gate and 8 spotting towers circled the inner perimeter. Caltrops liberally salted the ground on the other side of the trench. But as satisfactory as Titian found this portion of his defenses, he was less than pleased with the progress of the successive layers, and the main reason for this dissatisfaction was now strolling toward him with a rather smug look. Senator. Titian greeted coolly, using Godeson's political title rather than his military rank. Legate Titian, I see your troops are being kept busy, the senator noted mildly, glancing about. Insofar as I have men and the materials I need. I have neither adequate stone, nor concrete, nor engineers, nor enough wood. The rations which I requested are not arriving, so I am forced to scrounge for provender to keep an adequate enough supply of labor long enough to compensate for all the other commodities to which I am being denied. Well, you know I have discussed your requests and your situation at length with the Senate and the Emperor himself. Both the Senate and His Majesty feel you are being a bit alarmist. Godeson informed oily. By the way, he added as if an afterthought, how is the morale of your troops? I can only imagine how they must feel, being made to cower behind earthen works before the gate that is the doorway to the riches and conquests granted us by the gods. Titian ignored the prodding. You speak as though the gods themselves entrust you with their plans. The senator looked at him curiously. You sound as if you have no faith in the gods. The gods will do as they please, our own desires heedless, replied Titian. I place my faith in the exertions of men and little faith in those save mine own. He pointed toward the gate. They will come. Their spies, their contraptions, their eyes are upon us. They will come. Godeson smiled brightly. Then let them. The sooner they come, let them come. I have seen the testimony. Our enemies hide and fight from cover using magic to compensate for their weakness and cowardice in arms. The sooner their armies come, the sooner we will surround them and destroy them in the open. Then we will return to our duty. Our duty. To govern the nations in power, to dictate their rule in peace, to raise up the peoples we have conquered and throw down the proud who resist. Godeson paraphrased the ancient work. It seems our enemies do not see the need to be raised up, nor for us to dictate their rule. The pleasantness on the senator's face faded. Then we must throw them down. Let them come. When they come, Titian addressed Godeson squarely. We must destroy them upon this hill. We will defeat them here or we will lose the war. I find your attitude rather defeatist, the senator hissed. It is always the prerogative of the Emperor and the Senate to remove me from command here, Titian noted. Of course, if I am to be relieved then I have no place here. In that happy event, I will need to return to the capital, and in the event that sacred Alnus falls to the enemy, then it will be my regretful duty to tell His Majesty how my efforts to avert such a disgrace were undermined. The frustration on Godeson's face was clearly evident. He wished so dearly to send Titian away. The prize of a glorious victory he wished for himself alone, but the penalty for failure would equally be his. No, it was best if Titian stayed here. When the enemy was defeated, Godeson would make certain it was his version of events that were reported to the Senate and His Majesty. And if the unthinkable happened, then Godeson would make certain that the blame was laid on Titian's head and not his own. Perhaps, with luck, the enemy would favor Godeson and remove the legate permanently. I will leave you to your work, legate, Godeson said at last. Titian watched the senator leave. He could do the same calculations in his head that Godeson could. The senator would either claim victory or condemn him for any defeat. Such considerations were immaterial. Titian was a devoted soldier of the empire and he would do whatever was necessary and possible to protect it. In the coming days, his ingenuity and skill would be severely tested. It would have been another day in paradise, if he was not now a prisoner. As for the last month and a half, Legate Kalaz and what was left of his army were now being held as prisoners of war on an island, far away from the gate. The Empire's attempt to expand its territory across the gate on Alnus Hill was an absolute disaster, as thousands of his men had been killed by the enemy. An enemy unlike anything the Empire had ever faced before and possessed weapons of horrific power. With his army crushed and with no way to escape, the proud legate was forced to surrender to the would-be barbarians they were supposed to subjugate. Barbarians that were much more powerful than any of his men could ever realize. What came next though, was rather unexpected, as instead of being butchered right there and then, Kalaz and the survivors were taken to what looked like a coliseum of magnificent design. One that surpassed anything the Empire had built before. From there, the POWs were then taken to port where they were loaded onto the largest, if not the strangest ship he had ever seen in his life. It was absolutely massive yet had no sails. Just how did it move? But they were loaded onto this craft and would not see daylight for what felt like weeks. By the time they came off, the Imperials realized that they were now far from the city they had attacked. As they soon found themselves on an island with black soil and black beaches, with a single mountain that could be seen some miles away. An island that would be their new home for the foreseeable future. Surprisingly, the conditions in which they were being held were rather tame, far from what the Empire did to their prisoners. There were a large number open tents that held a number of beds and were collectively surrounded by a barrier he had never seen before. It was silver and rose up to 3 meters in height with sharp coils lining the top. It flexed when pushed upon but never broke, even after numerous attempts by some of his men to break through it. Attempts that resulted with said offenders being exposed to some kind of potion that was used by the guards. A potion that burned their eyes and lungs when exposed. It was at this camp that the legate finally realized just how badly the invasion had gone. Out of the 60,000 men that had been under his command, just under 1,700 soldiers now shared this prison with him. Just what had happened to the army of the Empire? Were he and these men all that was left of the campaign? Would the Empire counter-attack after learning of their defeat? Worst of all, what would happen to his family once news of his failure reached the capital? History had shown that families of generals who failed in combat did not have happy lives afterwards. If there was any consolation to his situation, was that his family could not see him now. A prisoner that was at the complete mercy of an enemy that was more powerful than anything the Empire had encountered. His imperial robes and elegant armor had been taken away from him and replaced with a bright orange suit. While he himself was forced to sleep with the rest of his men in the crowded tents. A man of his stature should not be forced to share a room with the men under his command, but his captors didn't seem to know anything about the rules of war or how high-value prisoners should be treated. But he dare not protest about his situation, as he did not know just what would happen to him. Besides, he doubted these men in green would even care. He was their prisoner after all. But despite their situation, the legate had to admit it could have been much worse. They were given 3 square meals a day and even had access to clean water. Not to mention that the men in green largely left them alone, unless there was trouble in the camp. But there was one other thing that the legate noticed. He was the only senior officer in the prison, as the remainder were nothing more than conscripts that had been gathered for the invasion. He was certain that there were other high-ranking officials like himself that surrendered, but he had not seen them since they were separated in the Colosseum. What had happened to them? Had they made a deal with the leaders of this world? Were they actively betraying the Empire? Most importantly, what would be his fate? Just what did these other worlders had planned for him? Kalas could not find the answers he sought, as all the legate knew was that he now a prisoner in a strange land and there was nothing he could do to change his situation. If he tried to escape, just where would he go? He was on an island far away from where his army had entered this new world. Besides, several of his men had attempted to do just that, and were killed the moment they tried to climb the fence. If morale was not low before, then the sudden and violent deaths of their comrades certainly did the trick. What was left of the once proud army was now filled with broken and traumatized men, all of whom had lost any hope of ever returning home and being with their loved ones again. All they could do now was wait to see just what the future held for them now in this world, a world they may now be forced to call home. "So, how's it going, Warden?" asked Centurion. "Well, so far so good," sighed Warden Smith, with Centurion sitting in his office at Iwo Jima. Most of the POWs are behaving rather well, quite surprisingly, beastmen are all docile. The only trouble we have so far is from several of the nobles. Many of the officers are seem to come from the noble families. Are they causing too much trouble? Well, they refuse to be seated with the beastmen or with those who come from the lower classes. They also demand to have better accommodations and to be treated according to their ranks. And may I ask, who's among the POW's nobles are causing more troubles than usual? Well, that'll be this young man. The warden then looked into his folder and took out a small photo, handing it to Centurion. His name is Herm Fool Mayo, continued the warden. According to what we know, he's a viscount of a noble family, a real arrogant young man, brash and reckless. Ever since he got here, he's been demanding that we should treat him like some goddamned king. Let me tell you, sir, this guy is one hell of an asshole. Is that so? Said Centurion, looking at the photo. I've heard he also was one of the commanders of the invading force, leading the beastmen. Yes, he is, sir, answered the warden. He commanded the goblins during the assault on Imperial Palace. When most of his forces were been destroyed by vacuum bombs, he and a few of his pals have escaped the battle, trying to get back to the gate, but they've been captured by the police. Now, he's constantly cursing his captors, saying that when the Empire returns, we all be hanged. Well then, said Centurion, I think I know how to cool off our fool's red-hot little wagon. Let me have your phone, Warden. The warden moved his phone to Centurion. Centurion picked it up and punched some numbers on it. A few minutes later, he spoke into it. Dobry večer, Tovarish Nachalnik. Good evening, Comrade Warden. This is Centurion Prime speaking. Listen, could you help us a little with our problems? One of the prisoners we captured during the Ginza incident is causing troubles, a real troublemaker. Yeah, I thought that some cool Russian air should take out the winds from his sails. What, you agree? Okay then, I'll arrange the transfer. Do svidaniya. Goodbye. Centurion put down the phone and looked at the warden. I've talked with the Russian warden at the Kamchatka prison, he said. He agreed to take care of our troublesome Viscount. You'll have the papers about his transfer by the evening. I want him to be airlifted to Russia by next morning. Gladly, sir, smiled the warden. Hope these Ruskies should teach that blonde bastard some good old-fashioned manners. I'll have him airlifted as soon as the documents have arrived. Lady Octavia had been granted permission to see her husband the afternoon following making her request of Lieutenant Taylor. In fact, it seemed that the lieutenant's superiors couldn't leap fast enough for the opportunity such an act of goodwill might provide. The arrangement was quickly made for Lieutenant Taylor to take Lady Octavia and her children aboard USNS Mercy, accompanied by a single unarmed retainer. They would be accompanied by 3 Marine guards and a driver, with 2 more sentries posted on Germanicus's door. This was both as a precaution, especially in regard to the warrior bunny, whose presence was deemed vital for Octavia in regards to the safety of her children, and to provide maximum safety for the legate's family. The carefully monitored visit was a major morale boost to both Germanicus and his relief of his family's safety, and their humane treatment did much to improve the legate's health and helped him form a favorable view of his captors that would pay handsome dividends down the line. Thank you again, Lieutenant, Octavia told Taylor the next day. Being able to see my husband and hear his voice has taken a tremendous weight from my spirit. And the children as well. This morning is the first morning since we arrived that I've seen Antonius and Marcus playing. Oh, Octavia nodded. And Lucilla. She's filled with life today. She reminds me of myself at her age. Your daughter has already struck me as being very formidable, Taylor noted. Yes, but until today much of the fire in her heart had faded. She's much more herself again now, Octavia chuckled. She's a very spirited girl. She's saying that up to now, that girl has been sedate. Heaven help the man she sets a fancy to, Taylor offered up in mental prayer. It seems your husband certainly appreciated the lunch you brought him, Taylor noted as a means of changing the subject just slightly, a touch of home. I certainly can't fault him for that. I think they make hospital cooking as bland and tasteless as possible to encourage people to get better just to escape the food. Speaking of which, Octavia smirked. I'm told you have arranged a feast of traditional American foods for this evening. Well, normally we hold the Feast of Thanksgiving in November, but by the time November rolls around, it will be almost impossible for me to get 500 turkeys and the associated fixing. So under the circumstances, I figured we would just hold the feast now and celebrate what your people are thankful for instead. Taylor left unmentioned the rumors circulating that some of the people assigned to Camp Augustus might be reassigned once the invasion went through. They would get to enjoy Thanksgiving with a family, even if not their own. And just what is a turkey? Lady Octavia asked. A large fowl, bigger than chickens, ducks, or geese, and that goes well with mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce. And something about a movie. What is that? Well, imagine if you went to a play and a scribe wrote down everything that happened, Taylor told her. Now imagine that instead of writing down words to describe everything, that the scribe could make a record of the sounds and the sight of the performers so that you could see that same performance of that play later. Especially convenient if the play had so many characters that you could only hope to get them to act it out once. I see, Octavia nodded. Admittedly, it seemed like more magic, but was undoubtedly more of the technology that the people of this world used in place of magic. And what is this movie about? Taylor had given careful consideration to showing these people any sort of contemporary media. Books were easy enough. Many of the noble ladies, especially Lady Octavia and her daughter, devoured almost any books he brought them. He was carefully working music up from classical. But television and movies had been a cultural minefield of epic proportions. Taylor wanted something that would speak to his nation's highest ideals and aspirations, even if those ideals were not always met. He had wanted to show them Gettysburg, but Chief Richardson had respectfully reminded the young officer that their guests would not have the same frame of reference as an American, and maybe it would be better to ease them in with something more relatable. After a time, he opted for Richard Harris in Camelot. It's about a legendary warrior king named Arthur who tries to rule his lands with a fair and just hand, but his kingdom falls because of pride, ambition, and forbidden love. An interesting choice. Wise men say that young officer who listens to his chiefs go farther than an officer with ears closed, he replied. I was right, Octavia teased gently. My new son is a warrior and a philosopher. Taylor blushed a bit at that. In the meantime, I am told you had an interesting morning. Ah, yes. Lady Agrippina has been in great distress over finding out that rather than dying on the field of battle, her dashing new husband and his entire legion fled for the gate and abandoned her. Ouch! Taylor winced at that. Then she noticed Octavia smirking. She was devastated at first, but now she has a very healthy anger burning. For a young lady I expected to be little more than a spoiled and dull bore, she has quite a creative imagination. She now has fire and a purpose, and I will provide her with guidance. She noticed a touch of alarm on Taylor's face. Oh. Don't worry. I can guarantee that the only one who has anything to truly fear is Legate Marius. Then before I go check on the preparations for tonight's Thanksgiving feast, allow me to offer up a prayer of thanks that I am not he. By all means, Lieutenant. By all means, Octavia agreed. The Marines and soldiers currently posted at Camp Fuji all knew that they were going through the gate, but it was only recently that they were finally given a time and date, July XX 1200 hours. In a few days, the combined forces of Japan, the United States and India would lead the charge into the special region, and set up a forward operating base for the Allied nations to use. Now, although 15 nations in total would be going through the gate, it was decided that the Japanese, Americans, Russians, Germans and Indians would be the first to go through. The reason behind this was rather sound, as the United States, Russia, Germany and India were more experienced in combat compared to the other armies taking part. While Japan's role was more ceremonial than anything, as their county and people were the ones who were initially attacked. There were some grumblings from some sectors, but ultimately the Allied nations agreed upon this. Besides, it would give some of the smaller member nations more time to assemble their troops in Japan. Now, with a date given, it was decided by the Gate Task Force Command (GTFC) to allow their units some much-needed time to relax. They would be heading into a new world after all, and they were already on edge as it was. The last thing anyone needed were troops who were, for a lack of a better term, nervous wrecks once they were on the other side. It was news that were welcomed by the soldiers and Marines, as they had a few days to relax before the invasion began. So what you think we gonna be seeing over there, Lieutenant? Dow of the Vietnamese People's Army asked, as the BTR commander had reunited with the Americans and Japanese soldiers he had met weeks before. Cat girls. Kurata said quickly, a huge grin forming on his face. And maybe some sexy elves too. Seriously dude. Cat girls, replied Kenny, with an expression THST said, this fool can't be serious. Why not? The young otaku asked curiously. Did you see what we fought in Ginza? Ogres, man. Freaking ogres. And did you not see like dog men and other animal hybrids they took prisoner? He has a point, you know, replied Lewis, as he took another swig from his bottle of Coca-Cola. If that world got dog men and ogres, who to say they don't also have cat girls too? See, he agrees with me, Kurata proclaimed triumphantly, at least one person was on his side. Though I would not get too excited about it, the lance corporal quickly added. Why so? Because if they got cat ears, cat eyes and cat tails, you know what else they might have, cat tongue. Lewis answered back, emphasizing the cat tongue as he spoke, causing some of the men there to laugh. He has you there. Atami responded, and besides, we have a mission to do over there. We may not even meet any cat girls. Would not think I would be hearing that kind of talk from you, Lieutenant replied Kuwahara. Thought someone like you would not want to go. I don't. But I have my reasons. The self-proclaimed otaku replied, as his thoughts briefly drifted back to that young girl he met in the palace. Besides, the sooner we finish our jobs over there, the faster I can return for next year's Macon. Figures. Shino grumbled, as she slapped her forehead. Yay, it was cancelled, Williams added on. And I was hoping to score some posters. This comment caught the attention of the Japanese soldiers. You were planning to go to Macon? A surprised Kurata asked. Yay, I had leave for the 16th and was planning to go, the Marine replied. I heard Naoko Takeuchi and even Tara Strong were gonna make an appearance. I was hoping to get an autograph. You too? Dao replied in surprise. I was going too. I was hoping to get a Sailor Moon plushie for my sister. Yay right sir, your sister. One of the other Vietnamese soldiers shot back, causing the man to glare at him. Shino was now in complete shock, as the assembled group began to devolve into conversation about anime and conventions they had been to. Otakus, she whispered out, they're all otakus. Believe me, I know the feeling. Santo replied, as she came alongside the sergeant. My wife is also a bit of an anime fan. And she and her friends get together, it like a small convention in our house. Well, what do you think we will find when we cross the gate, Louis? Puller asked his friend. What won't we find? The lance corporal replied. As far as we know, we might stumble across a pretty castle on the side of the mountain filled with colorful horses. Seriously? Dao asked his new friend with a look that said, you can't be serious now. Remember what we saw in Ginza? The Marine replied. Who to say such a thing does not exist? You're a weird guy, Yank, the Vietnamese soldier replied with a laugh, as the group continued on with their banter. All the while Shino was now starting to question her decision to join the military. Otakus. I am surrounded by otakus. Ah Chu. Are you alright, dear sister? Princess Luna asked her sister, as the older sibling sneezed. I don't know why, Luna. Celestia replied with an almost frightful expression on her face, but I have a very strange feeling that somewhere a group of bipedal creatures are debating if we exist or not, and the one who brought it up is winning. A group of senior military officials had gathered around a digital table to go over the information they now had. The Special Forces teams which had gone through the gate in the weeks before more that succeeded in their mission to gather intelligence on the world that resided on the other side. It was through those missions, and some questionable interrogation tactics used on POWs by American specialist, the GTFC now had a name for their adversary, as well as a layout of the land. Apparently, this Sateran Empire was the main dominant power on the continent known as Falmart and was ruled by one Moldsal Augustus and his family. It was this individual who had initially ordered his army to march through the gate in an attempt to conquer the lands on the other side. A march that left thousands dead and hundreds captive in this empire. The special forces were also able to cause a significant amount of havoc on the Imperial Army that was located around what had been identified as Alnus Hill. Thanks to their combined efforts, the Imperial Army was now in complete panic. As recent reports had indicated that most of their forces had moved further away from the hill and the gate. What was left was nothing more than a token force that resided on a nearby hill. For months, the Allied forces prepared for what would be the most ambitious military operation in history. Tanks, armored vehicles, jets, helicopters and well over 100,000 troops had been pledged by the participating combatants, and there was already talks that more may join them soon. China has recently voted to be a part of the upcoming counterattack, but would not be able to mobilize an expeditionary force in time to take part in the initial push. The Australia would also be sending its own in the form of Australian SAS and other special units. But it would take some time to deploy them in force to Japan and would miss the invasion as well. Soldiers and Marines were given special lessons in the local language, which was discovered to be similar to Latin, while some countries like Japan began to either pull older weapons systems out of storage for use, or issued new weapons and gear for the operation itself. The United States and India, an operation that was now being codenamed Stargate. With everything in place and the world watching with great interest, there was only one thing left to do: proceed with the operation. The atmosphere was absolutely energetic, as thousands lined the streets of Tokyo to see the spectacle that was about to take place. Tens of thousands of people, Japanese and tourists alike, all carried flags of the various nations that were to be taking part in the invasion, as they waited for their heroes to pass by. They did not have to wait long, as the first convoy of vehicles began to make their way down the street. The Japanese people went wild, as they saw that the vehicles that drove past were JGSDF. Isuzu Type 73s and Toyota Humvees loaded with Japanese soldiers drove by and were followed by Komatsu light armored vehicles and Type 96 APCs. Behind the Japanese contingent were the Marines with their venerable Humvees and MATVs, followed by Thrid tracks and their amphibious combat vehicles. The Indians also got wild cheers as well, as 11th Gorkhas and Madras Regiment rolled forward in their Tatra Safaris and recently acquired Force Gurkha 4x4s. With the BTR-80s of Maratha light infantry bringing up the rear. There were no tanks present in this display of force, as they had been trucked into the city the night before and were already standing by in formation at the gate. As expected, there were some groups in the crowd who openly protested the foreign troops, as they were convinced that Japan was more than capable of dealing with the gate by itself. In all honesty, people of Japan had general mixed feelings about the gate. Some wanted it to be destroyed while others thought that everything could be solved with diplomacy rather than raw firepower. There were even some who believed that the whole Battle of Ginza was nothing more than a clever ploy to give a valid reason to allow more foreign troops in Japan. There's still many who feared that this incident could lead Japan back down the road it took almost 100 years ago. A time when the nation sought to build a true Asian empire in an endeavor that ended with a war it could not win. No one knew just what the future would hold after today, but at least Japan would not be heading into the unknown alone. As there were many who were glad for the assistance Japan was now getting. It took a couple hours, but finally the first Waviki of the invasion made it to the assembly area. Flags of the participating flew proudly in the breezes. Special pavilions had been sent up just for the families of the soldiers. Many in the stands held up banners that had words of encouragement written on them. Others held up the flags of their respective nations while others just looked on with stunned silence. In front of the gate, each of the American, German, French, Japanese, Russian, Indian, Australian, British, Italian and GI. Joe soldiers were gathering in 2 rows of 20 people, which means the ANF will deploy 600 ground soldiers from each country, for a total of 2,400 soldiers. Behind them, there are several mixes of MRAPs, utility vehicle, and main battle tanks that will provide them against the enemy on the other side of the gate. The vehicles they bring were International Max Pro XL from United States side. Quantity 2, 1 per 10 American soldiers. Humvee M1511 from United States side. Quantity 3, 1 per 8 American soldiers. Gaz Tiger M from Russia side. Quantity 5, 1 per 9 Russian soldiers. ATF Dingo 2A 3.3 from Germany side. Quantity 6, 1 per 8 German soldiers. Toyota Mega Cruiser BXD-10 from Japan side. Quantity 3, 1 per 16 Japanese soldiers. M1A2 SEPV-3 Abrams from United States side. Quantity 4, 1 per 1 crew. 1 crew of M1 Abrams is 4 people. T90M from Russia side. Quantity 5, 1 per 1 crew. 1 crew of T90 is 3 peoples. Leopard 2A7 from Germany side. Quantity 3, 1 per 1 crew. 1 crew of Leopard 2 is 4 people. Type 10 from Japan side. Quantity 4, 1 per 1 crew. 1 crew of Type 10 is 3 people. The Japanese soldiers were wearing their latest camouflage pattern, the Type 3 and their full gear equipment like Type 88 helmet, bulletproof vest Type 3, JSDF combat wearing set, combat shoes Type 2, gloves, and holsters. The weapons they are carrying right now are a Hoa Type 20 assault rifle and Sumitomo Minimi 5.56mm machine gun, the FN SCAR and FN Minimi sisters from East Asia, as their main weapon, and an H&KSFP-9M as a secondary weapon. Even though they were using the modern standards for the army, their samurai spirit and politeness will always stick in their heart. Next to the Japanese soldiers were the warriors of the 21st century. The American soldiers are also wearing their completely latest Future Force warrior gear equipment with the camouflage pattern called Operational Camouflage Pattern. Just like what you see in the Hollywood movie about American soldiers, the Americans always prioritize every of their equipment to become the state-of-the-art the world. These soldiers are equipped with M27 IAR, M4A1 carbine, M110A1 CSASS, M249 light machine gun, Beretta M9, and Sig Sauer P320. Next to the United States' true friends and probably the one who can match them, the Russian soldiers were wearing their full latest gear equipment based on the Ratnik program and their digital camo called the EMR camouflage. They are no longer called an outdated army, after some Japanese, German, and American soldiers see how many years the Russians have been advancing their tech and leave their Soviet doctrine about quantity over quality. Now the Russians just prove it by showing the types of equipment they use right now for the expedition. The weapons that Russians are using are the Alaska 108, Alaska 74M, RPK 74M, SVDM, and MP 443. Other soldiers from their respected countries also wear their latest combat gear, because their own countries are wanted to field test their latest prototypes in battlefield conditions. With them, also stood G.I. Joe Greenshirts wearing their latest equipment. Their weapons included M32 Pulverizer SMG, XLMR-A3A laser rifle, MMR-6 multi-modular rifle and M6 SOCOM handgun. Back to the situation, a few soldiers see some civilians laying flowers to the dead or missing of their relatives and friends. Then, the Prime Minister of Japan Momotaro Tsurugi enter the podium and start to make a speech before the soldiers entered the gate. This bill, which had been championed by myself, has been passed by the Diet and has been given a formal blessing by the Emperor himself, said Prime Minister Tsurugi in his speech, as he addressed the crowd before him. Today, we embark on the greatest venture in human history, as we prepare to march into the unknown not as explorers or conquerors, but as a world united by a common thread. On July 20th, thousands of innocent lives were lost when an enemy calling itself the Saturn Empire came to our world in an attempt to subjugate our people and expand their borders. But in their quest, thousands died, including those from other nations. The government of Japan sends in condolences to the nation which lost citizens in the attack, but we are also forever grateful for the help our closest allies, Russia, China, Australia, France, Germany, India and the United States, who gave us on that dark day. On behalf of me, with President James Marshall, President Vladimir Putilov, Chairman Xi Jinping, and with the support of political officials from each side, especially the United Nations, this bill has been adopted, and now, at last, we are ready to dispatch our soldiers to the special region. All of you, the mission you are to be a part of is highly important. My only wish for all of you today, is that you all be careful in this endeavor and that your mission is successful. As the speeches were being given, Atami scanned the crowd and soon found just who he was looking for. There was a short black-haired woman with thick glasses standing in the crowd with a sad expression on her face. He did his best to comfort her in the days leading up to the crossing, but there was only so much the otaku could do. The last night they spent together, Riza made him promise that he would come back to her, saying that she would sell all his figurines if he did not come back, to which the man agreed. Atami just hoped he would be able to keep his promise to her. Following Prime Minister, entered General Hazama, with several other generals. "We are your commanders," he said. "I am Lieutenant General Hazama of the Japanese Self-Defense Force, commander of the Task Force Ginza. These are Generals Jorge Zhukov from Russian Socialist Federation, General Joshua Keating from United States, General Chong of the People Liberation Army and General Liudwig from Bundswar. The rest of your commanders you'll meet on your missions. According to our informations, the enemy on the other side of the gate has now only a small token of their forces, but we can't be sure, that's all of them, there could be more nearby. It's an alien world out there, and we don't know where we would go after we cross the gate, but we go with the hope and spirit of our people in our hearts and with the determination to find whoever did this shameful attack and bring him to justice." Atami's eyes soon found another sight that affected him greatly, as he now saw the young girl he had helped at the palace months, standing with an old woman near the Ginza Memorial. Apparently the young child had gone into the city with her parents before being separated during the attack. As it turned out, her parents were among the many who had been killed during the battle and as a result, left the young girl with only her grandmother as a guardian. Atami silently promised the child that he would bring those responsible to justice. Then he saw something, which really affects not only him, but also several others, both soldiers and civilians. He saw Centurion walk to the girl and her grandmother. After introducing himself to the old woman, he kneeled down and took the young girl in his arms, who hugged him and wept on his shoulder. Centurion suits her down, then he looked into her eyes and said something. After that, he get up and walked back to the podium. He looked calm, but in his eyes Tommy saw a grim determination to punish those bastards, who killed that poor girl's parents, and he thought only, that woe and death awaits anyone, who stands in that man's way. After the generals, entered the man, who U.S. Marines quickly recognized, General James, Mad Dog, Mattis. The Marines cheered wildly greeting their corps commander, while Mattis begins his speech. Where are my warriors? Where are my devil dogs? Where are my heroes? Here, sir, answered the Marines. Men, let me tell you something. When I heard about that shit that's going on here in Ginza, I was about to fire my communications officer and have him court-martialed. After all, who would believe that some crazy bastards appeared from this gate right in the middle of Tokyo and start killing and looting the people? And on top of that, they've got even some goddamned beastmen and dragons too. If something like that would ever happen to me, I'll probably shit myself. The Marines then laughed, while the general continues. That's a joke, sir. A lousy joke. And you wanna know the biggest part of this joke? Is that these bastards got their asses handed to them by the force 10 times smaller than their own. And after that, they all went running back to the gate, like a bunch of screaming girlies. What kind of enemies are we dealing here, who cannot even make a proper attack without fucking it up the hard way? The Marines laughed even more, but then Mattis's tone got serious. But these bastards has done something far worse than just killing and looting. They've took some of the peoples as hostages. And among them, were also people from our country. Well, we're not gonna let them get away with this, right, men? Yes, sir. What was that? Yes, sir. I can't hear you. Yes, sir. Mattis then looked at the Marines. That's right, men, we're not allow anybody spit in our face and walk away from it. And if someone there wants some fight, well, I know a group of misfits, who can have a few words with these guys. I'll ask you, men, what do we do with such bastards, who messes with us? Kill, 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 shouted the Marines. That's right, men, we kill. And make no mistake, men, we are killers, but we also protectors of any of those, who seeks our help. And I'll bet, there's a lot of people there, who wants our help from such bullies. So show them, why nobody messes with the Americans, and why the words, liberty, justice and freedom, are more than just words for us, they are our way of life. Hoorah! Shouted Marines. Carry out your duties boldly in Disting Valley, men. Follow the orders of Colonel Gibbs and Colonel Emerson, they are your new commanders. Good luck, and give those bastards a good taste of hell for me. Hoorah! Shouted the Marines, as the general leaves the podium. Another individual who had his family in the crowd was Lewis, as he could see both his dad and mother, as well as a few others, hold up a banner that read, Berks County is proud of their boys. Fuller also had his sister there with an American flag in hand. They had been flown in by the Marines in an attempt to boost morale and remind the men as to just what they were fighting for. It was a joyous event to say the very least. Then Centurion himself entered the podium and began his speech. Out of nationalism or politics the warriors of our world has been clashed for centuries. Those wars has breed hatred, greed, anger, ambitions and many other negative things. In the past, neither of us here was been different as the enemy we're about to face. I've been fighting hatred, greed, ambitions and other things for almost my entire life. That's how I've became who I am now. But all that has changed. In the year 1962, I've met a young girl Inako, who came to Soviet Union. She was dying because of the radiation sickness, but she begged me, as she was dying, to not allow Hiroshima ever happened again. Her words has become the main orders of life for me, and I've following them ever since. That's why I helped the people of Japan, when their country was been under attack by aliens or by kaiju, especially Godzilla. That's why I've created the Foundation of Internation Security, the Action Force and later the G.I. Joe. All these creations were been done for one purpose, to prevent our world plunging into the abyss of the Third World War. However, all this didn't stop the invaders from Saturn Empire to ATTCK Ginza. Many of the Japanese citizens, as well foreign tourists have died on that fateful day, but many others as well been taken to the world called Falmart. They're now suffering from the cruelest oppressions and mockery, reduced to nothing more than slaves. Some of the women and young girls even are sexually abused. Their cries for help are hearing even from beyond this gate. Do we allow these cries to go unanswered? I ask you, soldiers from other countries, my G.I. Joes, do we let those people there suffering in vain? No, hearded the united cry from all soldiers in the street. That's what I wanted to hear, said Centurion, because these people are waiting for us to deliver them to their freedom. And not just our people. Then, appeared a young bunny girl, who looked shy. Several people gasped to see her, as she walked to Centurion and gripped his hand. This young bunny girl named Parna, said Centurion, has told me, that the Empire is doing even more, than just enslaving humans. They enslave demi-humans, like warrior bunnies, cat people, lizard people and many others. Some of them become workers to do the hard labor, others become auxiliary soldiers to be used as nothing more, than cannon fodder. And what's worse, the women demi-humans are forced to become sexual slaves to please the perverted ideas of several nobles of the Empire. Many of the people were now angry and shouting several cries of displeasure, while the internet literally exploded with the words, Empire enslaves demi-humans. Demi-human girls become sexual slaves, which causes anger all over the world. That is what this Satyran Empire is, said Centurion, and that is why they came to Japan. If we allow only to forget what happened in Ginza, the same thing could happen in other cities from all over the world. Anywhere and everywhere, the Empire could strike to capture themselves more slaves. Well, I say, if they think that their scheme to attack our world will go unpunished, they're in the rude awakening, because we all now united in one cause, to punish Satyran Empire and to bring freedom to the people of Falmart. The soldiers and the crowd roared in cheering and shouting, freedom. The soldiers raised their fists, while the citizens waved their flags. Each of us has now bear the pain of been hurt by the Satyran Empire, said Centurion, and each one of us bear the same determination. Between those who experienced the pain, there can't be no hate or mistrust to each other. There are no enemies here, for we all bear the pain of those who died on that day, as well as those who got enslaved. We are no longer Japanese, Chinese, Russians or Americans. We are the warriors of the planet Earth. Centurion then pointed to the soldiers. And if anybody of you Americans have a grudge against the Russians, or you Chinese have the grudge against the Japanese, you can settle this when this war is over. He shouted, the enemy we fight now holds our dearest ones in captive, they also hurting other beings in their world with cruelty and injustice. As my father Optimus Prime used to say, freedom is the right of all sentient beings. And that's exactly what we bring to these people there, freedom. Freedom, roared the soldiers, raising their weapons. I will lead you, but I'm not experienced in leading such big operations, said Centurion. General Hazama and the others will help us, but I ask you, my fellow soldiers, my brothers in arms, lend me your strength in this fight. The soldiers were now cheering Centurion, holding their guns in stretched arms. All those who feel the way I am, shouted Centurion, follow me. The JSDF soldiers loaded their magazine clips to their Type 20, followed by Russian soldiers cocked their Alaska 74M and Alaska 108. The American soldiers adjusted their helmets and night vision, and German soldiers quickly entered their ATF Dingo and Leopard 2 tanks. Some of the gate guards are immediately removed the podium to let those IMV, MRAP, and tanks enter the gate. The automatic steel gate of the dome opened and revealed the same Roman-style building with a hexagon diamond in the middle of the front wall. The same gate that opened in the incident. Teams of the task force, Ginza, forward, ordered Centurion from his Razorback. Move out, commanded Lieutenant General Ludwig at the tank units. The moving beasts are now entered the gate portal. As they are inside the gate, a glowing blue light illuminated their body like the portal wants to give them an epic entrance. Not long after that, the remaining IMVs and MRAPs were entered the gate and following the same path as the tanks do. The blue light also irradiated them too. Immediately the tanks at the lead of the formation started up and began to roll into the darkness. The Japanese Type 90s lead the charge, followed by the Abrams of 1st Division's 1st Tank Battalion and finally the T-90s of the 12th Armored Regiment. Soon, it was time for the APC ACVs to enter with their crews, as Tanker 6 and the rest of 3rd Tracks and Maratha Regiment followed the tanks into the gate. They were ready to avenge what happened to their people a few days ago. I can't believe it, Our seniors were battling against the T-72 at Kuwait during Operation Desert Storm with M1 Abrams, and now we work together with those tanks to fight the enemy. What makes me more shocked is that now the T-90s aren't operated by the Iraqis, but the Russians. The real owner of the T-72s, Gunner Alex Clinton, recalled the story of his father doing at Operation Desert Storm and sneers a bit about the Russian armed forces' involvement in this mission. "This is the day of our first military cooperation with the Germans after the Warsaw Pact," said driver Valentin Petrushev of T-90M about the involvement of Russia and Germany. "If what they say is true, then all of Grimm's fairy tales are becoming real. Our childhood story becomes realized because of this phenomenon, because of their mission objective and what lies beyond the gate," reminded driver Werner Gross of the childhood stories from his homeland. "Hey, Atami," Sergeant Takeo Kurata tried to open a discussion and hide his worries. "Yes. If what Centurion Sama said right, do you think there will be more catgirls on the other side?" Feeling entertained and excited again, Atami answered Kurata's question. "If that world had dragons and goblins and orcs, there must be one." "Strike Leader, this is Overwatch," heard from Centurion's radio. "Be advised, you've got the enemy force sized about the division, armed with projectile heavy weapons and air support, about 4 clicks for gate position." "Understood, Overwatch," answered Centurion. "We're almost at the exit of the gate, ETA 2 minutes and counting. We need you to provide us the side guard, then your job is to capture the enemy commander. I want him alive." "Copy that, Strike Leader," heard from the radio. "We're in position 2 mics left from the gate, Overwatch out." "All units, this is Strike Leader," said Centurion into the radio. "We're now approaching the exit of the gate. Be advised, the enemy is expecting us. I want all our units to take defensive positions as soon as we exit the gate. Maintain full combat readiness." "Copy that, Strike Leader," said the Japanese infantry commander. "Yatsura-1 ready." "Tango-1, ready," said the American Marine commander. "STOROZH-1, ready," said the Russian tank commander. "Panzer-1, ready," said the German SPAAD commander. "VISHNA-1, ready," said the Indian artillery commander. "Alpha-1, ready," said Cilia. "JOE-1, ready," said Captain Gridiron. "Action-1, ready," said Action Man. "Shadow 2, ready," said Nick Fury. "This is it, men," said Centurion. "It's show time." From the opposite side of the gate, 1.92 miles from the ANF and the gate position, the 450th Legion and 421st Legion of Saturn Empire Army that were led by Legate Capagonus Ledius 450th Legion, and Legate Sobertium Warection 421st Legion, alongside a few of Augustus Empire auxiliary forces that consist of dark races and beast races, all under command of Legate Titian, has felt something come out of the gate. Then, one of the Saturn Empire soldiers looked at the direction of the gate and, thanks to the moonlight, he saw a strange, iron turtle, come out from the gate. "The other worlders are here," he shouted, "the other worlders are here." Then, after riding through the hall of the gate portal for a few minutes, the vehicles exited the gate in a menacing way. One of the T-90s, Storozh 2, noticed a fire torch that had been lightened up by some humans. When Sergei looked closely, he not only saw humans there, but also strange creatures like goblins, orcs, kobolds, and gargoyles. "Enemy army has been sighted. I repeat, the enemy army has been sighted," Sergei informed everyone. "Enemy sighted," a Type 10 tank commander cried, spotting thousands of creatures and soldiers carrying torches and a variety of weapons. "Everybody get in the position," ordered Centurion with a loud voice. The APCs unload up several hundred soldiers, mostly from the JSDF, grounded themselves and took up positions to engage the oncoming horde of enemies. The ANF soldiers exited their Tiger, Max Pro, Dingo, and Mega Cruiser, then started to take cover in the bush or lied on the ground while aiming their weapons at the enemies. Not only that, they are planting the M224, 120 Ker 40 Tampella, L61 81mm, and 2B14 Podnose mortars. It may be a man-portable weapon, but it is still deadly as the heavy multiple rocket launcher. Others carried FIM-92 Stinger and STRELA-2M manpads. "Cilia, take charge of the left flank," barked the order's Centurion. "Fury, you take command of the right. Action man, you and your team take care the cover fire, I'm in front. Let's do this, you guys. From his position, Centurion could see that the enemies looked rather confused and unsure on how to react. They must not have been fully prepared or expecting for anything to come through the gate. How many forces do we still have present on this side of the gate? He asked Setsuna. Only 15 tanks, 52 APCs, 20 self-propelled guns, 10 SPADs and 12 trucks and cars have come through so far, answered Setsuna, checking her tactical monitor that indicated how many vehicles were receiving and transmitting a friendly radio ping after coming through the gate. We're still too close to the gate, we need more room, said Centurion, knowing that the area they had just taken was too small to allow several thousand troops, never mind vehicles in. Then they heard a loud horn sound. Several ballistas begin to fire. VISHNA-1, this is Strike Leader, said Centurion into the radio, commence fire. Target the enemy ballistas. Copy that, Strike Leader, answered Indian Artillery Commander. The FH-77B Bofors self-propelled guns raised their guns and fired, their explosives illuminated the night. What is that? Gasped Legate Capagonis. It looks like some kind of an explosion, answered his subordinate, must be some kind of the other worlder's magic. The next moment, the ballistas exploded, shattering in pieces not just humans, but beastmen too. They destroyed our ballistas, shouted Legate Sobertium, forward. Drive these other worlders back to the gate. No, you fool, they only want you to attack, shouted Titian. The wyverns flied to the gate, but then several streams of fire shooted to them, blowing the wyverns and their riders into pieces, following by the traces of lights that shredded the rest of the wyverns. Mortars, commence fire, ordered Action Man. The mortars of the ANF soldiers fired their shells, which exploded right in the middle of advancing Imperial soldiers, causing more deaths and cries of pain. All tanks, commence firing, ordered Centurion. The Russian, Indian, Japanese and American tanks begin to fire. The rounds found their target erupting in a brilliant bright orange light, sending dead Legionnaire soldiers and other creature bodies and body parts everywhere. Fire at will, ordered Centurion, and the machine guns, grenade launchers and rifles fired at the Imperials, killing them by hundreds. The night sky lit up with tracer bullets and cannon rounds. The enemy began to drop rapidly as the machine gun fire tore through their ranks. Their shields proving useless against the penetrating power of the ANF's bullets, 30mm cannons, and tank rounds. Forward, men, shouted Legate Capagonis, for. His words were silenced, as the bullet pierced his head, killing him. Run away, screamed the legionaries, scared of the death of their commander. Fools, stand your ground, shouted Sobertium, get back, you cowards. But then another mortar shell exploded, literally scattering his body parts to pieces. Run for it, shouted the legionary, running back to the hill. Sir, the enemy is running, said Atami. Tanks in front, infantry, close behind, ordered Centurion, let's take that hill. Push forward. The tanks then rolled forward, passing Centurion's positions. Follow me, men, he shouted, raising his rifle, for Ginza. For Ginza, cried the ANF soldiers, following Centurion and his shadow warriors. The advancing tanks and infantry rolled down the hill then into the plain, while the Imperial soldiers were now running. No, you cowards, shouted Titian, get back. That's an order. Suddenly, several shadows jumped on him. He didn't have time to react, as his captors bound his wrists and legs and took away his sword. He then looked at his captors and saw, to his horror, their left blue glowing eye. The demons of the Alnus Hill, he whispered in horror. That's right, jerk face, answered one of them, we're the demons, and your ass is grass. The legionaries also saw the strangers, which scared them to death. The demons, they shouted, while running away, the demons of Alnus are here. Run, run for your lives. The tanks and APCs took the front, forming a loose line of armored vehicles with foot soldiers close behind. They advanced to the next set of hilltops to form a new defensive line. Atami stayed close behind a Type 96 APC, until he reached the 100-meter point and took cover. He quickly peeked his head from behind the mound of dirt he was behind to watch the enemies retreat further and further away. General, the enemy is still running, he shouted. Hold your position until more of our men get through, answered Centurion. As much as I would love to chase our enemy, we don't know where we are, and how many more of them out there. For now, dig up your positions and fortify them. We done for now our job. The gate is secured, but the enemy will be back, and now we have to hold our ground, until the rest of our forces will join us here. Yes, sir, saluted Atami. Centurion then took out the flag and put it into the ground. All soldiers saluted the flag of the allied nation's force. All right, men, said Centurion, back to your duties. Carry on. Hey, Commander, said Scott, coming to Centurion with captured legate, look, what we've got here. Good work, Scott, said Centurion, hand this guy to some of the soldiers, so they could deliver him to our staff, I'll question him there later. For now, take your ghosts and scout the area about 200 kilometers from our current positions, we need to know about any hostiles in this area. Yes, sir, saluted Scott. You've done a good job for this night, men, said Centurion, but this battle is far from over. For now, we need to make a first step in our campaign, so that we can make step 2. That's all for now, carry on. This is the end of part 3 of this What If, I hope you guys like it. Leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel to see more amazing contents.